There's a hidden trigger in your brain that makes you want exactly what you're told you can't have. And it's being used on you every single day. A parent tells a toddler not to touch something, and suddenly that's the only thing the toddler wants. A store puts up a sign that says only 2 left, and the item sells out within the hour. A person pulls away slightly in a conversation, and the other person leans in harder, more curious, more invested than before. This isn't coincidence. It isn't weakness. It's one of the most well-documented patterns in all of psychology. Once you understand the mechanism behind it, you'll start noticing it everywhere. In advertising. In relationships. In your own mind. Today, we're going to decode exactly why reverse psychology works, why almost no one is immune to it, and how understanding it can give you back control over decisions you didn't even realize were being made for you. To understand why reverse psychology works, we have to start with a concept psychologists call psychological reactance. This theory, first introduced by psychologist Jack Brehm in 1966, describes a very specific and very powerful human response. When people feel that their freedom to choose is being threatened, they experience an internal motivational state that pushes them to reassert that freedom. The moment you feel like an option is being taken away from you, that option suddenly becomes more attractive than it was a few seconds ago. This isn't about the object itself getting better or more valuable. The object hasn't changed at all. What's changed is your relationship to it. Once restriction enters the picture, your brain reclassifies that option as something worth protecting. When a choice is restricted, the brain's threat detection systems activate, similar to what happens when something genuinely valuable is at risk. The amygdala flags the restriction as a kind of loss, even before you've actually lost anything. The brain's reward circuitry, particularly the dopamine pathways, becomes more active. This is why telling someone they can't have something often works better than telling them they can. Psychological reactance isn't a flaw. It's a baseline feature of how the human brain protects autonomy. Everyone has it. The only difference is how strongly it activates, and how aware a person is of it happening. Now that we understand the mechanism, let's look at the 3 primary ways reverse psychology operates in real life. Mechanism 1. Scarcity and the fear of missing out. Only 3 left in stock. Offer ends tonight. This spot is almost full. None of these phrases tell you anything about the actual quality of the product. They tell you only one thing, that your access is limited. Limited access automatically increases perceived value, even when nothing about the underlying option has changed. In one classic study, participants rated identical cookies as more desirable when told only a few remained. Marketers have known this for decades. But it isn't just marketers. It's parents limiting screen time, friends saying, "I probably shouldn't tell you this," anyone who has ever said, "Don't read this." Mechanism 2. The boomerang effect in persuasion. The second mechanism explains why direct persuasion so often backfires. When someone tries to convince you of something too forcefully, your brain evaluates the pressure behind the argument, not just the argument itself. If the pressure feels too strong, reactance kicks in, and you find yourself moving toward the opposite belief. This is called the boomerang effect, and it shows up from teenage rebellion to public health campaigns. Campaigns using commanding language were sometimes less effective than softer messaging that preserved the audience's sense of choice. The harder you push someone toward a conclusion, the more their brain treats that conclusion as a threat. Mechanism 3. Reverse requests in relationships. The third mechanism shows up constantly in close relationships. When someone feels suffocated by a request, psychological reactance often produces the opposite of the intended effect. The person pulls away, not because they don't care, but because the request felt like a restriction on their freedom. The most effective influence in relationships comes not from demanding change, but from creating space. When p. Truth 1. You are not immune, no matter how self-aware you are. Knowing about psychological reactance does not make you immune to it. Even psychologists who study this for a living still feel the pull of scarcity. The mechanism operates below the level of conscious reasoning. Awareness helps you recognize it after the fact, but rarely stops the initial reaction. This isn't a weakness unique to you. It's wiring shared by virtually every human being. Truth 2. Your resistance to pressure is actually protecting something important. Autonomy is one of the most fundamental psychological needs a person has. The drive to protect your freedom to choose is the same drive that prevents you from being fully controlled by outside forces. Without it, you would be far more vulnerable to every form of manipulation, coercion, and social pressure. The discomfort you feel when someone pushes too hard isn't a malfunction. It's your psychological immune system doing exactly what it was built to do. Truth 3. The people who use this well aren't tricking you. They're working with your nature. The most effective communicators rarely rely on pressure at all. They create space. They offer choices instead of demands. They let you arrive at a conclusion rather than forcing you toward one. There's a real difference between exploiting your reactance for gain and respecting your autonomy enough to let you choose freely. The first is a trap. The second is simply good communication. So what do you actually do with this information? The next time you feel a sudden, urgent pull toward something, pause before reacting. Ask yourself, do I want this because of its actual value, or because something just told me I might lose access to it? That single question creates just enough space for your rational mind to catch up with your reactive one. It doesn't mean the scarcity is fake, or the argument is wrong. It simply means you get to decide with clear eyes. If you're trying to influence others, remember that pressure almost always produces resistance. The most lasting influence comes from creating enough space for someone to choose freely. Because when people choose something on their own terms, that choice tends to stick. Understanding reverse psychology doesn't make you immune to it. But it gives you the ability to pause, just long enough, to ask whether the want is really yours. If this changed the way you see a moment from your own life, leave a comment and tell us about it. Press like if this gave you something to think about, and share it with someone who could use a little more clarity about their own choices. I'm Psych Mirror. Subscribe so you don't miss the next time we hold up a mirror to the parts of the mind most people never examine. Take care of yourself. See you next time.